Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. The latest installment of What's Lindsay's Crafty Crap Look Like is embossing powders. And we're just going to go through my embossing powders. I'll share some tips and tricks and hints and information, just like always. Many of these products are probably discontinued. Some of the companies have gone out of business, but if the product still works, then I keep it because really there's nothing new under the sun. Companies just come out with their line of colors, which will look just like the line of colors you already have in a lot of instances. So I just, if I see something interesting and new or I get something for a project, I just add it to the stash. So the first thing I would recommend though, if you really like to use embossing powders or you have a collection of embossing powders, maybe you don't know what to do with them, is this book here. This is by Fran Seifert. It's Embossing Powder Techniques from A to Z. And I think you can, she's the owner of Stampendous, so I think you can probably get it over at stampendous.com or Amazon, but it is a wonderful, just treasure trove of ideas for embossing powder, like mixing up your own kinds, just different things you can do with them, like melting up a bunch of it and stamping into it, just a bunch of fun things. So if you have a bunch of powders and you don't know what to do with them or you're looking for some new ideas, I highly recommend this book. I don't see a price on the back. I'm thinking it's under 20. It's worth it. It's a wonderful idea book. Every once in a while I'll go through it and just, you know, try some new techniques because I enjoy melting stuff apparently, and this is a lot of fun. So that would be my, out of this whole box, this would be my biggest recommendation. And I'll try to link that up down below so you can find it. Another thing I wanted to share is that I used to keep clear and white and maybe black embossing powder in containers like this. This is an old Stampin' Up! Container. I actually cut the hinge side so I could take the whole lid off because it would flap shut on me and be really annoying. And I actually just now tested the embossing powder that's in here to make sure it was okay, because it was probably, man, it was probably like 10, yeah, I think it was before YouTube. I had these, had this stuff in here. So let me see, is there a date on that? Crazy for Christmas 2003. I don't think it was that old, but that's when that stamp set that I stole this for, stole the container from was from. But anyway, I got a big jar of white embossing powder at Joann's on clearance, and I think I had done a bunch of wedding invitations or something, so I dumped it in here. And the embossing powder still works, so I'm really pleased to report that because I didn't know if it might have gone off in all these years of just being in my basement in one of these containers. So yeah, you can totally do that. It takes up a lot of space, and my clear one was in like an old Tupperware, and it just got cruddy after a while. I had done some projects with the Boy Scouts. We were doing like a varnish technique on some wood, and by the time that Boy Scout session was done, it was so contaminated and gross that I just, I had to get rid of it. So I decided that I would waste less if I just kept it in the jars. Plus, I have so many that it'd be very impractical to have a box for each of them. But it does work fine. I used one of the kids' old baby spoons for the spoon in there. But yeah, I don't think I would do this again. Actually, I should probably, next time I have a jar empty, I'll probably try to decant this back into a jar just to, you know, I prefer to have it in the jars myself, but you can do either. It seems to be fine. I did have one bag of embossing powder once, and it was sent to me from a friend. It was like an embossing powder share, and it didn't work right. It wouldn't set completely. It wouldn't like melt well. And I thought, because it was mailed to me and in a baggie, not in like a regular jar, I thought that maybe there was either an interaction with the embossing powder and that baggie, or maybe humidity got to it or something, because my friend was in Louisiana and I was just like, something's not right with this powder. And so I surmised that it might be either environmental conditions getting to it, or it was the fact that it was not stored in its original container and there was some sort of problem with the interaction of plastics. So that's why I was a little nervous to recommend that people store their stuff in containers. Like, I know Jennifer McGuire does that, and a lot of other people started doing that too. I would pick something that seals pretty well though, because I still don't think you want to get humidity in it. But whatever, it's your life, you do what you want to do. I like jars myself. So one of the first embossing powders I ever got, besides just, you know, a clear black, silver, and gold, was this little set here. And this I picked up at Joann's, and it was a set of 24, I think. It was either 2 sets of 12 or a set of 24, maybe 2 sets of 24. I have quite a few here. They were by Stampendous, I do believe. And they were just these small vials of colors. And I think there was 2 sets, because I think I got like a jewel tone and more of like a muted tone, or maybe a brights and a pastels or something. And I really just liked that because it was such a nice variety of colors. And when the the colored embossing powder got really popular, like the Wow brand colored embossing powder. For a lot of instances, I'm like, I already have that color. I don't need to go buy that. And I think like the pastels had like regulars and like bridal, which means it's got a little bit of a glitter in it. If you ever see a powder called bridal, it just means it's got glitter in it. Like a white bridal is a glitter powder. So I thought it was a really nice selection of colors, and maybe it was like, I think it was like jewel and earth tones and then a pastel tone. And yeah, it worked really well. And what I also found was that on some of these, if it's a pearl instead of a white, you do need to say whether it's opaque or translucent, and you can't really tell from the container. So you could always emboss like a dot on a piece of cardstock and then glue it to the top or the bottom. I generally just keep mine upside down, and except for whites, it's pretty easy to tell what you have. But white and clear and bridal, and they can, and like a pearlescent white can look very similar if you don't have like any sort of like writing on the container or whatnot. But other than that, I store them upside down so I can see what I have. In my little drawer next to where I just, into my office, I do keep just a jar of black and clear. And when I just picked up this extra thing of clear, that once I run out of this, I'll have that one because I don't like to run out. And I also keep an Amazing Glaze, which is like a UT, which is like really thick. If I want to have a really thick gloss coating on something, I use that. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I keep in the office because that's what I use mostly, and then I can go in the other room and get some of these other ones if I need them. So I highly recommend it. I don't know if this set's still available, but Stampendous had these big multi-packs. Highly would recommend that because, again, it's like glitter. Embossing powder is slow. You don't use up that much. So getting smaller containers is usually the way to go, unless it's something like clear or ultra thick embossing powder where you're doing special effects or you're mounding up a bunch of powder to like stamp into. You're not going to go through a ton of this. So yeah, think about that. Unless you're a super duper high embosser and you are using it every day and you're embossing everything, then, you know, hey, a container with a spoon in it, that's probably the way to go. Oh, I thought this might have been a Wow powder. This is an Embossing Arts. I have a lot of secondhand Embossing Arts powders. I don't know if Embossing Arts is still in business, but I got this at a yard sale. All these ones that say CG on the cover, I bought those at a yard sale. Like, let's see, the girls were like 2, so they're 6, that was 14 years ago, and they are still going strong. These are... They're like the Amazing Glaze. It's ultra thick embossing powder. It's or ultra thick embossing enamel, also referred to as UT. And it used to come in a bunch of different colors, but now I think it's just clear. And Ranger makes this. It is a really neat product. It is basically, it's a thick crystal embossing powder, so when you heat it up, it's not going to catch a lot of detail. Like, this is a fairly detailed powder. If I were to use like a white UT, I don't know if they make that, but if I were, it would be, you wouldn't see crisp detail. You'd see a bunch of blobs because they're thick crystals melting down. So when you want an embossing powder that you want a lot of detail, like on a sentiment or something really dainty and delicate, you want to use either called a fine or a detail powder, so it will catch those details. If you want to like varnish something basically and have a really thick like lacquer on top of everything, you want the thicker kind because then you don't have to do a bunch of layers. 1 layer or 2 layers will give you a really thick coating. So I think it was Craft Barn or Craft World was going out of business. This was a long time ago, and they had these crazy cheap. So I bought a couple others too. I don't know how many. I bought probably 4 or 5, and I've used them all up except for these 2. So it was a good investment, and they've lasted. Other than that weird embossing powder that a friend sent me that went bad, I really haven't had any commercial embossing powders go bad on me. If I make a mix, like I'm doing a project and I'm using several colors, and I collect all those colors on my scrap paper, I put them in their own container and I try to use them again on a project fairly soon, because I do think when you mix up embossing powders, there can be interactions between the different powders you're putting together, especially if there's any metals in there. Things can tarnish and then just not want to set right. So I recommend if you do something like that, like even if you're doing like, say you've got a stencil and you're trying to emboss different areas, different colors, you got some adhesive down there, and you're dumping, you're putting purple down, then you're dumping off the excess in the purple, and then you're putting red and you're dumping the excess off in the red. I would not do that and put it back in your original jars, because the chance of those other colors contaminating them and you ruining a whole jar is high. I would put them maybe in like just a separate little, I don't know, container, and then try to use it up within the next week or 2 so that you don't have the risk of ruining a whole jar that would probably last you years and years just by trying to save a few granules of powder. That's penny wise and pound foolish. So So yeah, that's just my advice on mixing powders, because it is fun to mix embossing powders. A lot of these like Stampin' Up! Embossing powders I purchased from a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator who either they retired the products or she just didn't want to do it anymore, and I bought a ton of old embossing powders from her. They all work great. I just basically try to get a variety, and I do have probably more reds and greens than need be. But again, I don't combine them unless it's the same brand. Like if I had two Ranger clear detail embossing powders, I could put them together in one jar, but I wouldn't combine different brands. That's just me. If you want to live on the wild side, go for it. I get a spoon in here, and I use this for when I want to mix up a bunch of colors, and maybe I want to do like I want to do some embossing powder, but I also want to do like some glitter or some glass glitter or some mica or something like that. I'll mix it up in the spoon and I will heat it up over a candle. And that way I can pour it onto my project. Or sometimes I'll heat up a bunch of the embossing powder this way, and then I'll drop the inclusions that I want to put in the powder, like glass beads or glass chips, things like that. But I'll need a bunch of it ready to go at once. They did used to make a melting pot for embossing powder. I'm not sure if it's still available, but I think it was called, like, it was by Ranger. I think it was called, like, the UT melting pot. I never had one, but if you'd like to do a lot of projects like that, I'm sure that would have been a good investment. But I'm not sure. Anything like that that would heat up, I would imagine, would do well. You could probably use, like, I would probably even use, like, a coffee mug warmer and, like, a little toothfish can or something. Ooh, speaking of, I had that on with my tea earlier and I forgot to shut it off. Huh, almost burned myself. So anything like that, hot glue pot, something like that, I'm sure would work very, very closely. So basically, you know, I just have collected a variety of colors. Now this is, I have a few different colors like this. These are called either patinas or, what's this one called? Enamelware, verdigris, and there's a bunch of different blends like that. So there's a couple different kinds of blends you can find nowadays. These ones here that are called like patina or verdigris, these usually, or tapestry, sometimes they're called tapestry, they are generally just different colors, maybe even different size granules, like this is a tapestry here, of powder, and when you melt them down, you're still going to have that like a shiny enamel finish, but you're just going to see specks of different color. I think they're really pretty. This one looks like a birthday cake. What's that one called? Confetti Celebration. Isn't that pretty? So there's a bunch of different powders like that you can purchase. Of course, you could make your own mixes and do that. Just like I mentioned, do a small amount, do it in a separate container, and try to use it up. And maybe I'm just being overly cautious there, but I don't want to waste a whole container of this, where no, it's not that expensive, but hey, it's embossing powder, it's a microplastic. It is not something I want to waste, you know, it's something that I want to use responsibly, and you know, if I take care of it, they'll last me until, you know, it's gone. It won't go bad before then. So that's just maybe I'm just being a little too anal about that, but you know. This one is a mixed media stencil, Cosmic Shimmer. I don't think I used that one. This one was sent to me, but no, I haven't installed a seal on it. That was sent to me from the Cosmic Shimmer company. I'm going to hold that one out and actually give that a whirl. So these are tapestries or verdigris or enamelware. You know, they've got that multicolored effect, and it's really, really pretty. I store my powders upside down whenever I can so that I can quickly see what I have and grab what I have. You can get gold in different finishes, like antique gold, rose gold, old gold. Just depends on what you want. Here is an example of a clear, chunky powder. It's not going to give you, this one's called Thick and Slick. There's same as UT, same as Amazing Glaze. Different companies have different names. And this is $3.25, probably like, you know, 20 years ago, and they're probably like $6 now. I mean, they're not terribly expensive, but they can add a lot of bling to your projects. Another type of powder that's really fun, especially on holiday cards, are your embossing tinsels. And those are your glittery embossing powders. And they might have different textures of glitter. Like you might find some that have like more of that tinsely texture, but it's generally like a glitter. These don't give you the best impression, so I highly recommend if you're going to use one of these that you also stamp in the color ink that you're going to use rather than using a clear embossing pad. Like for this, I just use clear embossing powder, and this is just an opaque powder, just like all of these others, the metallics, the enamelware, the pastels, the colored, they're all going to show up fine with the clear embossing powder, but when you're using the embossing tinsel, they don't have as much pigment to them, and so because it's like half powder and half tinsel, and you're not going to get the details. So if I was going to stamp, say like Merry Christmas and use this, I would stamp the Merry Christmas in red rather than stamping it with the clear embossing powder, because even though it will stick to the clear embossing powder, I feel like you still need a little bit of body of color underneath it. Of course, you can also stamp this on black with the clear embossing powder and have like a very shimmery, pretty look. It's just not going to be as defined as stamping it on like a light color with the color ink of the tinsel embossing powder that you're using. So if you've not had good results with your tinsel embossing powders, try an ink that is the same color. It'll give you a much better result. And you can get those in many different glitter colors. This company here, it says PK Glitz, but I think I bought it from Stamp On It. PK Glitz, they have the glitter embossing powders in so many different colors. And if you go to a stamp show, and I think it was Stamp On It was the company that was selling it, they were selling like a, you could pick 7, I think you could pick like 7 different colors for $10 or something like that, and there were these small containers, but like I mentioned, a little goes a long way, and that's how I was able to grab a bunch of these unusual colors that I didn't have already, because I had a lot of like Christmas red and Christmas green, but not teal and not like this pinky red. I also got a clear, so these are really nice for when you want a little bit of like a colored glitter. And of course you could take clear embossing powder and you could mix your glitter in with it. Again, I would do small batches, like I mentioned. You certainly don't need to invest in this if it's not something you're going to use a lot, but I thought it was kind of fun, and just give it a good shake. And if you make your own, make sure you use a, well, you can use whatever glitter you want. I would probably recommend an ultra fine glitter, but you could use whatever you want. Just pull that back here. So yeah, that's pretty much that. You can get the glitter kind and pretty much whatever color you like. But PK Glitz is making it currently, so I know I just bought that like 2 years ago, so they should still be in business, I hope. And the funny thing about the silver and the gold embossing powder, they might just look gray. So again, you can write on the lid if you're not sure that you'll remember what you have. Sometimes the powder, the writing can be really difficult to read. Like this one does say sterling silver on it, but it's pink writing on a clear jar. So I mean, there's not a ton of contrast there. So you just might want to do that just for your own, you know, so you can find what you want quick. Like some actually have the names printed on them. But once you get the hang of it, you know, once you start seeing the same, you know, that gold color and whatnot, you'll know that, oh, that's an old gold, or that's a, oh, it's a gold glory, which is kind of like a vintage gold looking. Now, the other kind of powders that I want to mention are, well, this one right here is a specialty powder. This is heat and stick powder. There are a couple companies that make this, and to be honest, I haven't had a tremendous amount of luck with any of them, but it is kind of a fun product. It is an embossing powder. And honestly, I think you could probably do this with regular embossing powder, but it's meant to stay sticky. So you heat it up and it gets sticky, and then you put your flock or your glitter or your foil sheets or whatever down, and as it cools, it hardens back up, and you pull off like your release paper for your foil, or you shake off the extra glitter or whatnot, and you'll have, you know, the stuff stuck, but then once it dries, it's not sticky anymore. So it's pretty much like regular embossing powder. I think you could do it with regular embossing powder. There was another brand called like, I got it at a stamp show. Actually, I know that company's not in business anymore, so I won't even mention it. But I have a jar of that. It's not perfect, but sometimes it's a fun technique to pull out. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this product because I should do a side-by-side, this and clear embossing powder, and see if there's any difference whatsoever. I think Ranger might make it too, but it's just not, I haven't found it to be a terribly wise investment. And then in here, I have a bunch of, and these were all bought at a yard sale, I have a bunch of specialty holographic powders, and they're all a little different. So I think like this one has green undertones, this one has purple, this peacock, bluish colors. This one, I don't even know, bridal, so it's more white pearl, white, satin, and diamonds. So I got all these for probably 10 cents a piece, so I didn't, you know, I wasn't too picky. I decided to just kind of get it and then use it. This is a puffy one. This is like if you were going to do, like you want to do snow or snowflakes or anything like that where you want a puffy texture to it. This one's by Stampendous. They're no longer in business, but you probably can still find a puffy white embossing powder. This is I don't know why that one's in there. This is a Kaleidoscope. It's just a bunch of different iridescent colors. Judykins, I don't know if they're still in business, but their products were always really good. So if you see Judykin stuff, it's good. Let's see, this one's Hologram, so again, these are all very similar, but they might just have different undertones, and this is just pearl, so it will give you like a pearly finish to it. It's not really metallic, but it's just kind of like pearlex, you know, it's kind of just that, like a opalescent nail polish. It's just got a pearly sheen to it. Hidden Satin, this would be another like bridal, slightly shimmery. Oh, this one actually says blue. So this must give you like a blue undertoned satin color. So luckily there's a label on it. So I keep all these special effects white ones together that have other like holographic or colors in it, because otherwise I'll get confused if they're just floating around in here, and I'll pick it up thinking I have white or thinking I have clear and get something completely, you know, wackadoodle on my project. So that is it. I hope you found this useful. Oh, one other type of powder I want to share. These are fairly new. These are the, well, these happen to be from Emerald Creek. They're kind of a big player on the embossing powder scene these days. They have a lot of different special effects embossing powders, and I don't know if they've discontinued and I don't know if they like discontinue everything every year and come out with new ones or not, but I have a, Patina Oxide that I really like, and I like it because it's actually, there are some bigger chunks in it, but it's pretty much gives you an all-over enamel effect. And there's also this rust, but I did have some issue with the rust, and the rust is like a mixture of flocking and embossing powder, and I find that it's really difficult. It's like doesn't have enough, it's almost like it doesn't have enough powder for the flocking to stick, and I found that very frustrating to work with. So just kind of, I don't know, if anyone has any tips on getting that to work better, please let me know. It almost feels like it's only flocking. Maybe I need to mix it with some copper or something else to make it work a little bit better. But then again, I think this one might be discontinued. They both might be, I don't know. But these are from Top Flight Stamps, and they were sent to me when I was doing a project for them. And yeah, I just think when you have a lot of flocking like that, when they start adding things to the embossing powder that is not meltable, like the glitter and the flocking and whatnot, it can really make the powder more challenging to use. And if you're a beginner, it can really put you off on embossing altogether. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're a beginner, get a clear, and then any of your pigment inks, you can stamp with your pigment inks and clear emboss over them. Or you could get an assortment of your opaque powders. Your opaque powders are going to be the easiest to work with. I don't have any of the, like the new, there was like Distress Glazes. I think they were released last year or the year before, and they're basically a translucent embossing powder. And I didn't get that because when I'm going to emboss something, I like the impact of embossing. Either I like that opaque color, or I want the color underneath to show through. And I feel like the embossing glazes kind of were just like, just barely tinted translucent color, and for me that wasn't the look that I'm going for. And I could just stamp with like a dye-based ink. Like I could ink my stamp up with the embossing ink, then ink it up with a dye-based ink, and then stamp and then use clear and get the same effect. So I didn't go for that, but it might be something that you like. I just don't have any of them because I don't really care for that look. So yeah, there it is. And plus, once you have so much, I mean, stuff gets released all the time. I'm just going to look and see what I have and use something that's pretty close. And if there's a color that I want that I don't have, like, oh, I need a hot pink or whatever, and I'm like, well, this just isn't close enough, then I'll go buy a hot pink or whatever. I'm not that particular, I guess, or I would be better off to stamp with hot pink ink and then just use clear. So keep that in mind. You don't have to have every single color. You don't have to have everything brand new. This would drive some people insane. I'm not going to put these on a shelf and display them because they're all different sizes. Some of the, the companies aren't even in business anymore. They don't look pretty like, the pretty little spice racks that people have in their craft room with all their brand new embossing powders on there. But that's not typical, guys. Those are people that are on the design teams, and they're sent all that stuff to use in videos and to show off and whatnot. You don't need it to make a beautiful card. Collect slowly over time, and you're going to get stuff that you really like to use. And that would be my advice. Collect slowly over time. And if you have a lot of powders, I really recommend this book. I don't know if you could check it out from the library. You might even be able to look through it. I'll try to find an Amazon link. Sometimes they have the look inside and you can take a peek through. But man, I really like Stampendous too, I've got to say. As far as stamp companies, I like them. I like them. They're a bigger company. I realize that some people don't like to shop bigger companies, but their stuff's good. Their stuff's high quality, and I really enjoy that book and highly recommend it. So there are my embossing powders. I don't often add a new jar unless I'm replacing something I've used up or it's something completely unique, but they've all held up really well except for that one weird little baggie of embossing powder that a friend gave me. So take care of them and they should last you quite a long time. I was thinking that I was going to find a lot of bad ones as I've been using them, but I really haven't. So even this one that wasn't stored in the original packaging has held up really well. So I'm really, really encouraged to see that. Please give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying this What's in Lindsay Drawers craft supply series. They're kind of fun to make. It's kind of fun. I've actually been going through all my stuff throughout the month of January. It's going to go into February, probably March, because I find it very calming to kind of put hands on everything I have, see what I have. It curbs the urge to purchase, to buy things I might not need, and it reinvigorates my spirit for making art and crafts, because I remember how excited I was when I went to that yard sale and thought of those embossing powders, or like when I purchased a stamp set, or when I learned a technique. Like every time I look at this book, I'm like, I need to emboss more. I love it. I'm pretty selling this book pretty hard, aren't I? Geez, I hope you guys aren't disappointed by it. If you get it. Oh God, I hope it's still in print. I hope you can still buy it. That's gonna be awful. Get everybody all excited about this, and it's been out of print for a year. I don't know, but I think it's a good thing to do. You know, go through your stuff, put your hands on everything you own, and get rekindled before you start letting your fingers do the walking over to Amazon. Let your fingers go do the walking in your craft room and see what you've hoarded, because you're gonna find some treasures, I bet. Thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to have you. And until next time, happy crafting.